Welcome back to the RC Pilot's log. This is part 6 of the DC3 build. Let's get on with it. So I've gone ahead and started planking this side with 1 centimetre strips of the 3mm Depron. And I'm starting to think about where I'm going to put a hatch for the battery and to access and adjust the servos. I think what I'm going to do is have the hatch probably up to this former here and in line with the front former here. That will give me loads of room to position the battery for the CG. So what I'm going to do is plank this whole section, both sides, smooth it and fill it and get it nice and smooth, and cover it in fiberglass. Then I can cut it out as a hatch and make a floor for it that I can then put a battery plate on and a battery strap, and have that as the battery compartment. So it will be from this former to this former, both sides planked down to about halfway, glassed and then cut out. So that's the planking on and sanded, mostly sanded. There's a few spots that need to be sanded some more, and that will get a coat of filler. It'll be sanded again before being fiberglassed. And then what I'm going to do actually is cut the nose off here and make it out of blue styrofoam, and possibly recess into it, so if I need to I can put something like the receiver right up the nose and keep the weight forward. I don't think I'm going to need to. This is quite a big battery section. If this is cut off at the centre and down here and at the front, then this whole piece will lift off and give me a nice large area for battery placement, and I think that should work really well. So I'm going to let this glue still just a little bit wet in places. I'm just going to let that dry a bit more before I put some filler and sand it, and hopefully get some glass on it tonight so that it will be cured and ready to cut tomorrow. So now that's all nicely sanded smooth, I've prepared a piece of glass cloth to glass over that, and I will put a piece this end as well, and then I can cut out the hatch and have a nice solid, reasonably solid piece that will then I can make my battery tray underneath. Once that's done I can start planking the rest. So I'm going to mix up some resin and get this on and curing, and I'll probably glass the tail feathers while that's curing. So the glass on the canopy section is hard enough now that I can start cutting out my hatch. It's not completely cured, there's still a slight tack to it, but I'm happy that it's solid enough that I can work with it. And the tail is nice and solid as well, so they all need some trimming up. There's a little bit of excess here, so I'm going to get on with trimming that, and then I'm going to mark out where I'm going to cut my hatch. So I had planned to cut about halfway down here and along to make a full removable top half of the fuselage at the nose, but actually I think it's going to be better to go about a third of the way down and retain the structure and curvature of the fuselage to give it some strength. So I'm going to mark a square line across here and hopefully carry that back to the former where I'm going to be cutting it, in line with this join here where I did some planking previously. So I'm going to mark that up and start making some cuts. So I've cut off the hatch and it's reasonably successful. It's going to need a bit of work. I wasn't able to cut it cleanly, so I'm going to need to work on putting some edges to it and getting it to sit nicely. But in the meantime, I need to build up the structure around here before I can cut out the ribs inside to build a plate. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to plank the rest of the fuselage and round underneath to get some strength back into this section. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'll cut loads of strips, hopefully long enough to go the whole way, and start gluing and trimming those and gluing them on. Right, so I've cut 10 1cm strips that I'm now going to stick onto the fuselage and plank all the way down one side. Then I'll do the other side and wait for that to dry, sand it, fill it and glass it as I did with the canopy. Just received the Tailwheel from Sussex Model Centre. Cost me £9 and it's basically a bit of spring steel, a washer, a spacer and a wheel and a plastic collar. And it's designed so that you can bend the spring steel 90 degrees, tie it into a servo or the rudder, or you can chop it off, put a collar on the top here and have it as a free castering wheel. I had intended to do it as a free castering wheel because I'm going to be using differential thrust with the two motors and the rudder's got plenty of authority and throw. So a castering wheel, as long as I limit it to 180 or maybe less, maybe just sort of 90 degrees, will provide plenty of turning and manoeuvrability on the ground. I will probably go for a cast ring wheel because the plans call for it to be slightly further forward than the rudder. That will help with the centre of gravity, and also cutting off some of this steel rod will reduce the weight. I can use, I haven't got any correct size wheel collars, so I'm going to use this servo linkage stopper, and I can tighten that down, and that will act as a stop to prevent the wheel falling down. So I'm going to give that a go, see if I can position that. The plans call for it around the 30th former 30, and that lines up quite nicely with an open section of the fuselage at the moment. So what I'm going to do is just mount this in and see what that looks like. You may not quite be able to see it on camera, but I've cut out 1/2 of the 6mm 2-ply foam here, and also made a recess for the control linkage lock that I'm using to hold the wheel in place and stop it sliding out, and that will sit in there quite nicely and look fairly flush once I've got the planking on. I will need to use something, probably a couple of small blocks of balsa, just to stop this doing a 180. I don't think it will do on the ground with some forward motion, but I want to stop it at about 90 degrees each way. So I'm going to epoxy that in now and then plank over this side so that it's just a bit stronger there. While that filler's curing, I'm going to wire on the XT60 connector to the ESC power wires here. A couple of people have commented that the power wires are too long and that actually I should extend the motor wires to the ESC. I've always thought it was the other way around. I've always thought that if you extend the motor wires you could get timing issues. I don't know, to be honest. I have extended power wires before, further than this, and I've seen a lot of other people doing it. If there are issues with that, then I think they're on the extreme end of a problem, and I'm quite happy to extend these the way I have here. So they'll go in parallel into a single XT60 connector so that I can power both ESCs and motors from one battery, or one source of power. I understand that running two separate batteries can cause issues, sync between the motors. If one is drawing slightly more than the other, you could lose an engine, you lose a motor, or lose an engine as if it were a real thing before the other, and you end up with just a unwanted situation there. So I can run, if I need to run two batteries to get the capacity, to get the flight times, or to get the weight, I can do so using a parallel connector. So I'm effectively going parallel to parallel, two batteries to two motors via one connector. So I'm going to wire those up now, solder them up, and then we can actually do a run-up test and possibly even a taxi test tomorrow. We've got a rudder, we've got a tail wheel, and we've got motors, so I don't see any reason why I can't spin it around the ground. That will be interesting. Okay, so that's an XT60 connector soldered in parallel there. So I'm now going to set up the test receiver and get them fired up. So this is starting to take a really long time and get quite tedious. Planking, gluing, filling and sanding. It's getting there slowly, but at this stage it's very fragile and I've broken the planks several times. But once the glue's set and it's filled and dried and sanded, it's actually quite solid. I'm quite pleased the top half is pretty solid. But getting this underside done is just taking its toll on my patience at the moment. There is a piece that needs to go on under here to follow the contour of the wing back, and it blends back into the fuselage and again along the tops of the wings. It's like a fillet that shapes it in. That will be made, I think, once I've glassed it, and I can stick that on and then just glass over that section. For now, I've got some planks gluing in at the front. I've got some filler setting at the back. So actually I'm going to tackle something that I've been meaning to do for a little while. I need to work out how to set up differential thrust on my Flysky Paladin PL18 transmitter with the FTR10 receiver. The motors will be on separate channels, one left, one right. There's the receiver there, so I need to work out programming two separate channels on that for throttle with differential thrust linked to the rudder. So yes, let's see if we can get that working. Okay, so it's taken me a while, but I've now got it worked out. I've got 3 mixes set up to achieve my dual motors, differential thrust with rudder, and they are linear mixes. Mix 1 is mixing the throttle channel 1 with the secondary throttle on channel 7, so master is channel 1, slave is channel 7, upside is 100%. That gives me both motors. The second mix, mix 2, is mixing channel 5 rudder as master with channel 1 throttle as slave, downside and upside 100%. That means if I give it right rudder, I get right motor. Sorry. If I give it right rudder, I get left motor to pull that side round. And then mix 3 is the reverse, so channel 5 rudder as master to channel 7, which is the secondary motor, as slave, downside and upside both minus 100. And that gives me the alternate. If I go to mid throttle, it brings one motor to 0 and the opposite motor to 100. And that should work really nicely and give me really good ground control. I really hope you're enjoying the series so far. I'm certainly enjoying the build. If you are, please do click subscribe and don't forget to click the bell to be notified about the next episode. Please don't forget to comment below if you've got any hints, tips, suggestions, or want to ask any questions about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Thanks for watching and take care.